All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and today we're going to be talking about an entirely really this is my final 2024 prediction. Um, I've gone back and I've done a little bit more research and to possible 2024 candidates for the Republican Party. By the way, I'm still working under the assumption Joe Biden is going to make it and run for re-election. However, due to some of the research I've done, I think Matt Gaetz is going to be the nominee for the Republican Party. He's going to win the all crucial state of Florida, and, well, Florida is the most important state in the Republican primaries, and he's got the Florida man vote on lockdown. Uh, so, yeah, it's going to be a pretty easy win for him in the primaries. So let's go ahead and just go state by state. We're going to go from west to east, and we're going to start with Alaska. It's normally a pretty comfortably Republican state. I don't see why it would change in this scenario. And this is kind of going to be true for a lot of West Coast states as we move to Hawaii. Hawaii has a very large Asian population. As we've seen in the news, the Asian population has responded to some of the recent crimes against their community in Atlanta and other places by them buying guns. I mean, and we can even go back to the 90s to see that this is typically how Asian Americans respond to violence against their communities, is they purchase a lot of guns and they go out and defend themselves. They fight back. And that's what Republicans like. And because they're typically buying ARs, AKs, that sort of thing, well, that's not going to lean you towards voting for the Democratic Party. So we're going to be honest here. The Republicans are going to win the the Asian American vote in 2024, and combine that, and we move to California, Oregon, Washington, where there's also a massive Hispanic population, which tends to be more religious, tends to be more socially conservative. With the way the Democratic Party is going, they're not going to be able to hold that, and California, Oregon, and Washington have both high Asian American and Hispanic populations. And they don't have an insignificant portion of whites without a college education. You know, the only people the Democrats are going to be able to get in these three states and really across the nation are going to be your white college educated liberals. And those do not make up a majority of the population. So honestly, these three states are going to be safe Republican just because of those facts combined. And then we, of course, go through the usual safe states in the Great Plains and Midwest. By the way, Nebraska is second. While having a very high college-educated white population, it's still got enough of the countryside. And plus, Nebraska is going to gerrymander it so heavily that it doesn't matter. Kansas, I don't think the trend towards the left is real. That's just fake news spread to you by biased liberal media. Oklahoma, it's Oklahoma. So let's go back and go to the Southwest, where I was talking about the Hispanic population. Now, these are Mexican Hispanics, which are much different than other groups, such as in Florida, the Cubanos, the Cuban vote, the Nicaraguan vote, the Venezuelan vote, the Honduran vote, that sort of thing. But I think these trends in the Rio Grande Valley, as well as in these heavily Hispanic areas in the desert Southwest, I think those trends are very real. And they're going to continue further, and they're going to be accelerated, honestly. So I don't see a reason not to have these as safe Republican. Texas, sure, the Democrats are probably going to pick up in some of the suburbs, but those urban cores, which are, at least as we move further to the east, are going to be heavily African American, as we saw in 2020. Those shifted towards the Republican candidate. This is because young black voters are less ideologically tied to the Democratic Party than their parents or grandparents. And I don't think Biden's going to help with this group by making constant gaffes, saying that black kids can be just as smart as that poor kids can be just as smart as white kids, implying that non-white kids are, idiots, and a bunch of other comments like that, right? If you don't vote for me, you ain't black, that sort of thing. And the Republicans are going to have a very good campaign against that. So, Texas, we're going to go Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, Georgia. The shift in the urban core towards the Republican Party is going to be real, and it's going to flip that state back to the Republicans very solidly. Florida, we already talked about the Cuban vote, and of course, like I said, Matt Gaetz, he's from Florida. He has the Florida man vote on lockdown. And with the Democrats in control, they're probably going to allow 16, 17-year-olds to vote as well. And Matt Gaetz has that vote on lockdown. Trust me on that. He has that vote, tied up in his pocket. He's going to win the 16 and 17-year-old voters handedly. They're not going to have a choice in whether or not to vote for him because he's going to be the best candidate for their interests. But yeah, moving on to South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia. I mean, yeah, most of these states are pretty safely Republican, but they're going to be even more so. Ohio, Indiana, Missouri, Iowa. Now let's move up to the industrial Midwest, the Rust Belt in Illinois. Illinois, of course, has Chicago, which did shift towards the Republicans. That trend is going to be exacerbated, as well as the rural areas continuing to trend more towards the Republican Party. And of course, Chicago also has a very high Hispanic population, specifically the famous Earmuffs District, the 4th. Let's be honest here. Matt Gaetz would win that state handedly. And, the same goes for places like Michigan. That's Wisconsin, Ben. Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. We go down to Philly. They're going to win that too. Maryland has Baltimore and the D.C. burbs. That black shift towards the Republicans is real, folks. We go to Virginia, a very, very interesting state. But let's be honest, Joe Biden is pushing for the policies that progressive Democrats have been arguing for. That's not a recipe to win the moderates who inhabit Nova. It'll do really well on college campuses, but that's about it. You won't win the Norfolk area. You won't win Virginia Beach. You won't win Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William by going so far towards the progressives. You just won't. So that's going to be safe Republican. We move up to New York. Matt Gaetz is going to win New York City, folks. And he's going to win the state. Part of this is because of Andrew Cuomo. But again, you have that inner city shift. And, that's going to offset any losses in the suburbs. And of course, New York rural areas still have a lot of potential Republican voters who don't realize that the Democratic Party has left them and is now the party of the college-educated white liberal sissy. We go to Vermont. They have a Republican governor who has 69% approval rating. Nice. Same with Massachusetts. Both of those states are safe Republican because of that fact. Let's be honest here. We go up to Maine. Maine is a weird state, but we'll give it to the Republicans just because the second is going to turn out in droves, and Suzanne Collins won that state very easily in her Senate election. She didn't even need to go to ranked choice, surprising all the handicappers. Not this one, of course. Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Hampshire are all very swingy, and they're going to shift towards the Republicans, especially because Connecticut is kind of tied to New York in terms of its voting. So, let's be honest here. New Jersey also kind of follows New York's lead. Pennsylvania as well kind of pushes New Jersey in a certain direction. That's why it's a little bit more competitive than you might expect. Delaware, I hate to admit this, but, Joe Biden is going to win it. It's his home state. You typically get a home state advantage. And D.C. just has too many folks who are, dead set on, extremely large government and craziness, and I don't see it. I don't see it flipping, no matter how well Gates does. But this is my final prediction for 2024. I think it's correct. I think that there's no way this is going to be incorrect. You know, and it's just because, like I said, Asian Americans, because they're so massively, they've bought so many guns recently that there's no way they're going to vote Democratic. Hispanic shift is real. A shift in the black population is very real. Matt Gaetz is going to easily win the 16 and 17-year-old vote. There's no way that he's not going to have them in his pocket. And, this is a very, very realistic prediction. So, there's a few states that maybe you can make some arguments for. New Jersey being one of them. And I could see you making a reasonable argument for Maine's 1st congressional district. But let's be honest here. Biden is going to get destroyed. This is going to be, Mondale McGovern levels of destruction. Probably even worse than that. I could see Matt Gaetz getting 70% of the vote. I really could. Anyway, I'm going to end it here. Leave a like, a comment, and a subscription if you enjoy the content. Share with anybody else who might enjoy the content. And have a very nice day. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.